approval of the minutes of the September 1 meeting. I don't have any changes. Are there any changes from the committee members?
None for me.
Do you both approve the minutes as is, I guess is another way to ask it. I'm seeing
Yes.
head nods and a yes. Okay, great, awesome. Meeting minutes approved. And the first agenda item is the ordinance 4A pertaining to unnecessary noise, disturbing the
Councilmember
peace.
Murillo, we
Mhm.
skipped over announcements, and I do just have 2 key staff members we wanted to introduce, if that's okay.
Yes, I totally skipped through that. Please feel free to make any announcements and introductions. That's okay.
So Cydia, I'll turn it over to you. Go ahead.
Well, good morning. It's nice to see everyone. And thank you, Jessica. So good news, we have 2 brand new community engagement coordinators that both started on Monday. So they're learning together with Scott Campbell. So I have Rachel and John. I don't know if you want to just say hello and say something about yourself for a quick second.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Yeah, it's definitely it's been a crazy couple of days. Just started on Monday, but my name's John Harris, and yeah, I came here by way of up until last Friday. I was working with Jefferson County Human Services, and before that, I was a state probation officer. So I got a lot of experience with government, but this is my first time really working within a city and with the community. So I'm really excited to be meeting and working with all of you.
And my name is Rachel Whipple. I come here from the state of North Dakota. Actually, I'm brand new to Colorado, brand new to government. Just came here from the nonprofit sector, but also very happy to be here and to work with all of you.
Thanks so much, John and Rachel, and welcome.
Welcome to you both.
Yes, welcome to you both. Alrighty, now we can move on to agenda item 4A. Councilmember Marcano, are you giving a presentation or is staff?
I'll go ahead and kick us off and then defer to Angela to see if she has any additional commentary, if that's okay.
Sounds good. Go for it.
All right, great, thank you. So this ordinance came about after several Ward 4 residents reported repeated noise issues in their neighborhood. These were taking place after hours, and they were very frustrated because PD didn't have availability to come and make that prima facie determination. So basically nothing was done, so the issues persisted. So what this does is it amends our existing code to accomplish 2 key things. So the first is it expands the existing determination of noise issues to code enforcement, which makes it potentially more likely that a complaint can be handled by staff through a reporting process. And then the second is that it allows 2 or more witnesses, so just residents, to submit a sworn statement along with audiovisual or other evidence to get a complaint and a summons underway. And the key thing is that they need to be willing to testify at trial, or this goes nowhere. And the reason we wanted to include that is because I don't want people to weaponize a process against neighbors just to, basically get into like tit for tats. And we want to just make sure that disruptive behavior stops in communities. So that's kind of the intent of these amendments, and I'll hand it over to Angela, who helped draft this, to see if there's anything I missed that she might want to highlight.
Good morning, council members. Actually, I think Member Marcano covered it all.
Okay.
The major amendments that we made to the disturbing the peace ordinance. The 2 witnesses will be required. Video, audio evidence would be very helpful, along with the sworn statement. Those are the major components that have been changed in the ordinance itself.
All right, thank you. Yeah, and with that, if y'all have any questions or comments, feel free.
I don't think I have any questions at this time, but from what, I guess to summarize all of that, it sounds like there's more, you're adding more clarity and specificity to our process relating to noise, unnecessary noise, to have additional, like just not just one person complaining essentially, but also not indicating that they're, I guess like interfering with like any like court process that would need to happen for like additional action. Is that accurate?
Yeah. The key thing here is that we're allowing residents now to kind of take action without having to necessarily rely on, law enforcement or even code enforcement to be there to witness something. And then if, if the resident route is taken, they do have to show up and testify, because there might be basically we're trying to avoid scenarios where someone just doesn't like their neighbor and two people put together like a frivolous complaint and then, waste everyone's time, So that's why we want that sworn statement, and that's why they actually have to be there to testify. So, this is only to deal with real issues.
Do we have any information on, I guess, what the circumstance looks like right now, like as complaints are concerned? I'm not even exactly sure how to best phrase that question, but do we have data on what's going on now?
That is a great question, and I think I would defer to Angela or to maybe Jessica to see if we know how many complaints come in.
Yeah, so I'm gonna hand it over to Sandra to talk about the type of noise complaints that code currently works with. It's not typically a neighbor to neighbor type of dispute. And again, code only works during the day, Monday through Friday, so it would only be available during those times. There are some special circumstances where we may go out and look at construction noise and things like that. So I'm going to just let Sandra talk about currently what code does related to noise disturbances. I don't think we have the data from PD at this point to look at. And then, just to reference the memo that we included, there's several things that would have to be worked out related to the actual implementation of this ordinance. In terms of how evidence is supplied and in what way and things like that. And then, if code was going to be operating after hours, we would have to come up with a process and kind of that fiscal analysis of what that would look like to do this. This is not typically a life safety complaint, which is the only thing that we would dispatch an on-call code enforcement officer for on the weekend. So Sandra, I'll let you talk about the type of noise complaints we typically oversee now.
Thank you, Jessica. So currently, we deal with land use issues. So if we have a construction site that's starting work early, affecting a residential area, then, or it could be an event that has a temporary use permit that may be having excessive noise after it's supposed to end. We would go out, we have 2 officers respond, and we go out and we have a noise meter that we take measurements from. We take ambient readings before situation may be happening to get a baseline, and then we also take readings when it's occurring. If there is a noise issue at that time, we would contact like if it's a construction site or a business that may be having loud music. We would contact them then and talk to them about it and give them a courtesy notice to say you need to cease with the noise. This is the information regarding the ordinance, and basically give them a courtesy notice first off. We would then monitor the area to determine if it's occurring again, and then we would take further action if that's the direction it ends up going. So we have 2 officers responding, taking the readings for continuity and safety. And then monitoring it after that. And if we have on some occasion issued construction site summonses regarding the noise, excessive noise, but most of the time they come into compliance, they understand, or we find out that whatever information is being provided by the resident or whoever's making the complaint is not enough evidence. We have had some videotapes and noise, recordings of noise, and what we get is very minimal. We're not able to determine what level it exceeds, if it exceeds the level that's required, permitted by the ordinance. So I think that's kind of briefly what we do. So when we go out, officer safety is primary for us. We do go out early hours, but we're also staying in our car and we're not making any contact with folks during evening hours or dark hours. So I'm not, I can't remember what else you were asking me for, Jessica, as far as that. So if we'd be responding after hours, the noise complaints would be concern for our safety. When approaching unknown homes or vehicles or parties that could be happening, for a code officer to be going out without additional training or additional resources for protection is a concern, a safety concern for staff. And currently, right now, the staff capacity to enforce this ordinance could be interesting. And yeah, so.
The only other thing identified is all of our code complaints come in through Access Aurora, whereas a sound or a violation may come in through dispatch right now. And so code doesn't take any referrals from dispatch. They're not connected to police radios. They're not connected to dispatch in any way. So if it was an event that was occurring real time, that would still have to come in through dispatch. And then the kind of neighbor to neighbor taking a video, I think the concern there is trying to understand what the decibel level is if it is on video. And then they would submit that through Access Aurora right now with the way we currently have code complaints set up. So there would be a delay. We'd have to look at whatever evidence is provided and then try to figure out a process for determining if that noise level is above or below. And again, it's hard to know from a video on your phone what kind of that noise level is. Certainly if it's a disturbance that's loud and you could see something happening, you might be able to create that, but we don't have that process and procedure in place yet. And like I said, there's two different ways that complaints come in right now, whether they're coming in through dispatch or Access Aurora.
I guess the other question is who would be determining the violation? If it's just a recording, who would be making that determination? The code officer, the resident who's complaining, or would it end up in the courts to make that decision?
All right, well, thank you both for that. And I guess first, part of the goal with this was to create an alternative, means for us to address noise complaints and to take some of this off of PD's plate. Obviously, safety is a concern, as you mentioned, Sandra. I wouldn't be expecting folks to go knock on, doors, especially after hours, just given the potential for, a conflict between the residents and code enforcement. For me, it was more about having the ability to make that determination to then issue a summons after the fact. As obnoxious as noise issues can be, I'm having a hard time imagining when they might rise to the level of, emergency, where they need to be stopped immediately. But and most of the complaints that I've gotten from my constituents are that nothing is done, as opposed to we can't stop the noise immediately. They want the behavior to change. And I would imagine that they also want it to stop immediately, but they understand that that's not necessarily possible or practical given staffing issues and just how these kinds of calls are prioritized. So I feel like this is a area where there's potential to, like, as I mentioned, take this off of law enforcement's plate. Unless there's other associated activity, let's say the noise issues are not just loud music, but potentially like the discharge of firearms. Obviously, at that point, it would rise to the level of law enforcement response, not for code. So, with regards to who makes the determination, when I was discussing this with Angela, it was understanding that we have already a process for this, which I think you alluded to. And it sounds like, Sandra, you have decibel meters,
Yes.
right? Okay. Because that was something that I was told that PD does not have, or that they don't have maybe an established process for utilizing. Because that was part of what my constituent was originally requesting, because I guess the state code, you know, and has some kind of verbiage in law where it requires a measured, you know, assessment, right? As opposed to our city code is just a, you know, subjective determination by a responding officer, whether it's code or APD, as the ordinance is currently written. So it was my understanding that for the in-person ones, you know, we would leave that subjective determination in place. I didn't know that y'all had decibel meters. That's actually even better because I think you can make a, you know, a solid case that way, that there is in fact a violation occurring. And then for the video evidence, that actually came when I was speaking to one of my constituents who most recently made this complaint, that you could see items on their shelving rattling because the base was hitting so hard basically that it was shaking from from the house over. It was causing things on their shelf to shake. So that was why we wanted that evidence. So
Well, with the decimal reader, we have to take a pre-reading and then
to establish a
before the
baseline.
noise and
Yeah.
to establish that. And so I don't know how well that would work if we're receiving a recording. I would say some of the recordings we have received, people, it certainly would not make a reading on the decimal reader as being excessive, right? So, and if it's somebody's loud music next door to an apartment, which I think is what you're saying, I don't know that we would need a decimal reading for that if things are shaking off. So
Yeah.
are we saying that no one would respond to those folks? They would provide a video and a recording of the noise and then submit that to Access Aurora for us to do an investigation on.
That was the idea with that second approach, yes. So that, you know, we could at least, especially for those, I guess, more egregious violations, have some kind of recourse for residents.
Well, if that were me in an apartment and somebody was blasting music, I would want more immediate attention to that than waiting to submit that through Access Aurora, if that were me. But I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, but then law enforcement, you know, it's a low priority, and on a busy night, they're not going to get there until after the activity has ceased. And they have to, you know, again, currently for them to do anything, they have to basically witness and then make that, you know, prima facie determination. So, yeah, so that's the rub. So that's where we're trying to like find some kind of way to get around that requirement so that folks can, you know, if law enforcement or code is not there to see it in the act, they can still, you know, they still have a path to addressing the issue.
Well, without direct contact with dispatch, being dispatched to that particular call would be difficult for us.
Difficult, right. So I understand that there's some logistical items that need to be changed here. And it sounds like a staffing component to this as well, because you just don't have the manpower to do this. You typically only, you know, code typically only is out Monday to Friday, as you mentioned. I suspect this will be probably more common on the weekends than necessarily during the week. So yeah, I'd like to know what, you know, an estimated, what the complaint volume currently looks like and what the cost would be from a staffing standpoint to be able to fill in, you know, those shifts to have folks be able to respond.
For code enforcement to respond?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to find ways to basically support PD by taking this off their plate, you know, within reason, obviously. As I mentioned, if there's gunshots or something like that, then they're the ones that are going to be showing up. But if it's like, you know, just a rager, having someone be able to witness it and then, you know, basically issue a, you know, summons, gather that evidence, I think would be important. And I saw Roberto's hand go up in chat here.
Yep. Thanks, Councilmember Marcano. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
So I won't belabor the point, but I think you mentioned it in your last comments. I think in the spirit of the fiscal note conversation we've been having at the council level, this is a prime example of where we'll need to really dig into the numbers of what this will take. And I think included in that fiscal analysis is some of the logistics that you're talking about: dispatch, training of new office code enforcement to do this. We would definitely need to dig deep across a few departments to make sure that we had a good accurate. So we'll need time to do that. I think one of the questions I had, and I don't know if it's for you, if it's maybe for Angela. So if I'm understanding you correctly, the code enforcement officer would not intervene or make contact with any of the parties, but rather would be there to make a determination using a decibel or their own witness or some kind of pictures or video. And then after the fact, the next day or subsequent day, return back to the property and issue a summons. Is that accurate?
That's kind of the idea, especially hearing the safety concerns.
Okay.
Again, what my constituents have asked for is a way to hold folks who are, repeat offenders accountable and encourage behavioral change, as opposed to, necessarily get like a quick response from PD.
So my question then, and it may be for Angela or for you, either one, is in terms of the legal threshold, when you are not making contact with that individual or the party that you've determined is the one that is in violation, and you go back the next day and they said, well, that was, I wasn't here yet that day, or this isn't my property, or that's somebody else, or, that was, folks, we shut it down, or, you could imagine the amount of excuses of somebody showing up a day later to say, hey, you were in violation last night. What is the legality there, or is that a clear line to be able to do that when they could say, well, that wasn't my property, that was next door? I know that we can do that with video and say, well, we know it was this property because we're here, but I'm trying to get a sense of any legal issues that we might have to be able to properly make that determination and summons the right party. I just want to, if we're going to go through this to be effective and to actually provide the deterrent beyond what Sandra was saying in terms of you're not going to get immediate relief. We're not sending the code enforcement officer in for safety reasons and a whole bunch of other reasons, but will we be able to properly serve folks, 12, 24 hours later, however much that time is, and what are the legal requirements there for them if they do say, well, that wasn't me, sorry, that was my neighbor?
Roberto, when the two witnesses from different separate households, when they appear to testify in trial, they will need to identify that the individual that's at the defendant's table is the individual that was causing the unnecessary noise and disturbance to their peace. That is a requirement that cannot be done through video. They have to be able to point to that person and say, yes, that person was the one that disturbed our peace.
Okay.
They both need to do that.
Got it. So Councilmember Marcano, to your request, I think we can certainly work on a fiscal note. I think it'll take some time. I think we want to obviously see the calls from APD first, to be able to see what we're dealing with and volume, and be able to put a finer number on what that would look like. But I would only reiterate that these positions, code enforcement positions, given the 8 to 5 of what we do here, are already difficult positions to fill and train and keep. And adding this may be will be a challenge if we do move forward. And this is a beyond what they typically do and hours in terms of what they typically do. Certainly, it's a policy decision, and but I just want to make sure that we're clear that how we would do this would take quite a bit of discussion from code and from Jessica around how do we rotate current code? Do we retrain existing? Do we provide new officers? I mean, this is really a different task than we have undertaken. And so we'll need to spend some time and figuring that out to make sure that you get the right number. my analogy would be the way we structured the mobile response team and what it took to coordinate between dispatch and that team, the training that's required of those folks to go out to those kinds of calls was not an easy undertaking and required significant resources, both FTEs and money, to be able to have them properly trained to do that. Now, I know we're not intervening with the parties in this situation, but we're almost going all the way to that point. They are definitely going to be out there. They need to be trained. They need to make sure that it's, body worn camera, whatever the video they're using has to be all operationalized. And that would take quite a bit of doing, similar to what we did, not exactly, but similar to the mobile response team in terms of what you're talking about with removing stuff off of APD's plate. So I just want to make sure that I'm just respectfully being clear about the kind of policy shift we're talking about and the amount of resources that it'll take to operationalize it should we move forward.
I want to just add one more piece, similar to our mobile response team. We're not able to dispatch directly for those types of calls at this point. So we would have to work with dispatch to see if there's a way to dispatch. And then obviously code does not have PD radios that are connected in with dispatch. PD has been resistant to having code have those channels currently.
Why is that?
And so we would have to, like, code currently when they're riding around in the neighborhood does not have the police channels.
I guess I'm asking why. Is it that APD is hesitant? Sorry.
Yeah, just from a informational, having, other folks with that information out in the community. So we have, a way to get in touch with PD quickly on the radio, but we do not have those police channels. And so, for the mobile response team, they're looking at the types of calls coming in and self-dispatching off of that call log. And so I imagine this would have to be something similar at this point. But again, we don't have the right, we don't have those channels currently. And so that's one of the first conversations we would need to have. So, the alternative for me, another option in this case would be that, after hours, the two parties would submit the video and they would submit the evidence. We would not have a code officer go out and verify that it's actually loud at the location at that point in time. And again, that's going to be kind of like a civil dispute that we would have between two properties. They could submit it and we would just have to make a determination based on the evidence that we have. It's similar kind of to our barking dog piece, which is, I know Angela mentioned, kind of basing it off of some of this, where we don't actually always have somebody come out. We just have to have two people verify, yes, there was a dog barking, and yes, it was loud, and yes, it was annoying, and this is who we think was making that noise at that time. And so, we can come back with some options related to kind of the full-blown having code dispatched out to just kind of more of that passive piece, which could be another, again, option. We just have to have that submitted through Access Aurora and then submitted. And I'd say another piece that I don't see in here, which we do have at our disposal, is mediation between the parties at the household. And sometimes, usually when it gets to this point, two property owners are very annoyed with each other, but that would be another option that we could offer to the community, which some may be interested in.
Okay, I'm gonna, it sounds like the conversation kind of is coming to an end, at least for the time certain. Sounds like there's some follow-up that needs to get done. Councilmember Marcano, I guess, what are your thoughts on kind of moving this forward? Was there an ask to move this forward? I don't
So given the variety of options, I guess, before us, each of them are going to have a different kind of fiscal impact. I guess I'd like to get a sense of the committee. Is this something that we're interested in exploring further? Because I'd like it to come back with that fiscal note and analysis completed before we send it off to study session. Or rather, kind of discuss those options in more detail here in this committee before then taking it to study session for the discussion with the full council.
That's okay with me. But yeah, I think just coming prepared, like with all of the, like, I guess, analysis and back and forth for the next conversation, is my ask. Councilmember Medina, are you okay with bringing this back after the back and forth and kind of additional vetting happens?
Yes, I would. Thanks.
Okay, awesome. All right, then I guess we'll see this potentially next month. Thanks, Councilmember Marcano.
Thank you all.
Okay, we are at 10:34. Let's see, is there anything that needs like an action today? It looks like everything is information only. Okay, so let's go ahead with the city-owned buildings. I guess before we get started though, actually, go ahead, Andrea. I do have some questions on kind of where we're at in the process that I think will inform my, at least my direction.
Okay, terrific. So today's item, as you'll recall, at the last committee meeting, we posed recommendations on 2 city-owned facilities, inclusive of 1400 Dallas. And since that time, city management has requested that we actually move forward more expeditiously with 1400, with an RFP for 1400 Dallas Street. And we are attempting to do that at their direction. Staff is in the process currently of drafting what I would consider a combined RFP, which is a request for qualifications, as well as a request for proposals for the disposition of the building, consistent at this point with the urban renewal plan and strategy. Historically, this building has a goal of providing studio and exhibit space to develop primarily visual artists, but there are other artists in the building at this time. So we are moving forward on that direction, unless there's discussion here and that we want to change that direction. And what we're looking at is a public process requesting information from organizations to manage the facility in 2 specific areas. So the first would be sort of statement of qualifications, and we're looking at things like the organizational structure and their business plan. How does this fit in with that particular organization's mission? Financial information, as we've discussed before. Part of the concern as we want to move forward with incubating artists, particularly local artists, in the facility. So we are looking for their financial statement and a statement of their professional experience in a variety of activity levels. What is their programming experience? What is their experience working with other arts groups? How would they propose to develop artists to move on? Because it's not necessarily to provide it's to provide initially low-cost space, but what we'd like to see is development of the artists in that building to make sure that they can be successful, build their self-sufficiency, and allow them to move forward to more privately held space in order to build up the economic vitality of the area and create that community wealth that everybody's so interested in. The second part of the proposal would be an actual proposal of the types of programming and what the organization then sees as their proposal for management. How would they structure the programming? How would they create a pipeline of artists? And how would they create educational and collaborative programming to provide a learning environment for the artists, both the artists and the public. So it would be a two-pronged approach, just to say, once we develop this, we have already met with the Aurora Cultural Arts District organization at the request of several members of council. We have talked about how we can collaborate on not only this initiative, but on arts district initiatives more generally and more broadly, and have committed to continuing that conversation, inclusive of reviewing once we are at a more formal stage with this proposal, with this RFQ, RFP, coming forward and discussing it with them and bringing that forward to all of council for their input prior to issuing it to a broader audience. So that's a very quick overview. In the interest of time, I know you have a very aggressive agenda here, so I'll be happy to take questions or any discussion that you'd like.
Gotcha. I appreciate the quickness, Andrea.
Sorry, I wasn't too fast.
No, I think that was good. I think my questions are, I'm trying to, I recall that we left the last conversation wanting more information. Like there was a few pieces that were moving, right? Like one was on the redevelopment plan. Does this like align with that? Wanting more information at some point. And then I think specifically asking to connect with the community wealth building network, because I think a lot of what you're saying aligns with kind of those principles around building community wealth. So I guess I'll ask, like, have you all been able to connect with the community wealth building network?
So not at this point in time. As I said, we received direction from the management team that they wanted to move more expeditiously with this. And so we've been putting our energy into developing this. We haven't worked specifically with, we have connections with the community wealth building through the small business. I think if that's something that we believe that the goal of this results in community wealth building, where we're going with this, it is consistent with our overall, the tack we're taking is consistent with the overall strategy. And as I said, we have committed to working both with the Aurora Cultural Arts District, and we can work with the community wealth building organization as well to do that. We're looking to build wealth in a specific community, which is the artist community in this particular neighborhood. So there's a lot of proposals. We could, at your direction, share this prior to coming to council with them and get their input on that, if that would be acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, so I see this as information only. So I guess I was a little confused on like where we, I guess, stand in terms of direction. But I think at a minimum, yes, connecting with the community wealth building network. But I guess I was under the impression that it would have been, it's a larger conversation, because it was the other conversation was not just $1,400. It was like city-owned buildings in
Right.
the ACAD or arts district, and kind of how we can deepen partnerships and community economic impact as a result of like our ownership of those buildings. So I actually kind of thought it was a little bit broader, a little bit bigger in that meeting with the community wealth building network to kind of develop what that would look like. Because I hear you that there are some outcomes there, but I guess that's not necessarily our area of expertise, is building community wealth. I think we can like logically understand how some of these outcomes build community wealth, but they're very focused on kind of anchor institutions. Like it's called a network, but it's an organization that is, I think more of in like a consultative kind of space. So yeah,
Right.
I feel like at a minimum a meeting would be necessary, but I guess I kind of thought that the direction was more having kind of initial conversations with the Community Wealth Building Network and talking through like deeper ways that we direct and program city resources related to city-owned buildings. And like as a result, 1400 Dallas would be kind of in the purview of that kind of larger discussion.
Yeah, so let me just respond to that a little briefly. I think it makes a little more sense so we specifically talked about the disposition on 2 buildings in specific, and the uses for those buildings by the overall plan and their location and the uses that they've been committed to. For example, the Music City building, which we've somewhat put on the back burner in favor of moving 1400 Dallas more quickly through the process, could be very different uses. And that would, in my opinion, though I'd like to confirm this, would impact the input we get from the Community Wealth Building Organization about how each of the buildings could be used to support community wealth building. So if it's acceptable to you, what I'd like to do is deal with the buildings individually and let them put their individual input. If we say, here's the general direction we're thinking of, what are your inputs? Do you have groups that you're working with that would be appropriate anchors? Do you see this as contributing? What changes if I show them a more completed request for proposals, they can alert us to areas where we can either expand our vision or maybe narrow it a little to achieve a more direct outcome. Would that make sense to you?
Well, I'd like to hear from the committee as well. I think I'm just like, I hear what you're saying, like, and I think you're obviously aligning it with like very specific outcomes that likely are gonna, like tangible outcomes of a conversation related to like securing building space and all that stuff, right? I think yeah, I think I'm a little bit hung up on like, all right, we're still moving forward with our process, and then we'll just ask Community Wealth Building Network for input, which is better, I think is still a reasonable way to move forward. I guess I just thought that it would have been a little bit more a coordinated strategy around the use. But I hear you on like the moving one building over another or separately. I don't know if I have strong opinions that like they should all be thought through as a collective and then like figuring that out, or we're just kind of moving real time one by one. Councilmember Marcano, Councilmember Medina, do you guys have any thoughts on the specific part around community wealth building being incorporated into city-owned buildings in the district?
Yeah, I'll just say that to me, that's a given. That's something that we need to be prioritizing. That was part of the, I think, idea originally behind the public investment into this part of town and the creation of ACAD. Although I do have a question in the item summary, it still says that we're moving forward with disposition of this building. That's the intent to sell it. Is that
No.
correct, Andrea? No?
No, that is not correct. So disposition just means we're going to change, how we're going to, and as a matter of fact, with this particular building, based on its prior use, we feel that this particular building, it's likely that we would not sell it, but look for a management organization.
Okay, so it'll remain a city-owned property.
And so in this particular case, Now that might change with, I think we're open in other structures, because again, what we're trying to achieve, or what the strategy is trying to achieve with this building, is creating affordable space and developing artists, and disposing of the building may not achieve that, because when private entities get a hold of space, our experience has been that it's great for a little while until they decide that they can make a profit on the building by selling it. That may, for use that may not be within the strategy directly. And I would point to places like Rhino, where all of a sudden it's become very popular to take space that may have been low cost and affordable to artists and things like that, and turn them into more retail meccas and hotels
Yeah.
and office buildings and things like that.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Councilmember Marcano probably agrees with you, and I hear you too. So, okay, in terms of direction, since we are running out of time, I'm having a difficult time like materializing the direction, I guess, on my end. I do want you to meet with Community Wealth Building Network. I think that was at least clear. If I could go ahead.
I was just going to suggest, how about we do that, and then maybe we can have we can talk about what their reaction was, and that can help you frame better how you'd like to move forward.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I just need some information. So yeah, actually, I think that's a great next step, Andrea, is to meet with them, and then you and I can touch base as soon as, I want to honor the kind of expeditious timeline if that's the direction, but I think it's worth that meeting. Let's touch base after the fact, and kind of communicate with the committee moving forward on kind of what that means or the outcomes of that conversation. Sound good? Councilmember Medina, Councilmember Marcano, are you okay with that next step?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. I appreciate your work, and thank you to our two council members for additional direction. All right, I have a hard stop at 11, but I guess if some of these items are pressing, it seems that there's information only. I will just hand this off to the vice chair to continue the meeting if that's amenable. Otherwise, we can reschedule. So let me take a quick pulse of the remaining items. We have the neighborhood engagement update, and then House Bill 221137 update and impact on code. With the two speakers for those agenda items, are those time sensitive? Do you how much time do you need, I guess, just given the timeline, or do you want to reschedule?
This is Sandra. Mine's not time sensitive. I could reschedule whatever works out for you guys, or we could certainly talk about it.
This is Scott, and that also works for me. You just let me know what works best for y'all.
Okay. Let's see. And y'all were the two agenda items following up the neighborhood engagement and the House Bill code updates. Well, let me ask, Councilmember Marcano, Medina, did you want to continue the meeting? It's just information only, so I'm happy to review the recording after the fact if you want to continue, or we can reschedule.
I'm fine with moving these along to the next one, just so that we can all be present for it. Assuming, I just don't know what the agenda is already shaping up for next month. Do we have an idea?
For next month, we have a couple updates. One, an annual update on the housing strategy in terms of accomplishments over the past 12 months. And then we also have the Aurora at Home plan that has been adopted by the Aurora at Home board to share with the committee. So two items, I don't think super hefty, probably just, maybe a 10-minute presentation each. you know, the House Bill one is really just awareness around that because we've received some questions. The neighborhood engagement one is really just to highlight the great work that the community and our staff have been doing over the summer with a new program. So I don't think anything significant where we can't add them to the next agenda.
All right. I think we also have prairie dogs on the next one too.
We may have prairie dogs, yes. I think we have a internal meeting in the next 2 weeks on that as well.
All right, great.
Okay, then, Councilmember Medina, are you okay with moving this to the next meeting?
I'm good.
Okay, I apologize, staff. I didn't realize the other conversation would have evolved so robustly, the first ones. So I apologize. Moving forward, I will try to be more mindful to kind of save your time. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and move that forward so that we can all be present for the conversation. And I think that takes us essentially to the end of any content of the conversation. Do we have any updates from community members? I'm looking at the chat. Do we have any just call in numbers? No, so we don't have to unmute folks. And I think I just see staff on here. Okay. All right, I'm not seeing anybody trying to communicate for any updates, so I think we're good to go there. And that concludes our meeting. Real quick, next Horns meeting is scheduled to be November 3rd at 10 a.m. It's in the middle of what looks like is the veteran salute. I don't know if any of our council members want to attend that or are planning on attending that, but that's something to consider. Do you all want to keep the same meeting time, or do you want to move that to maybe the Friday or the next Thursday?
I think we should move it, just to be on the safe side here. What
Okay.
days would work best for y'all? I could do the same time slot on the 2nd or on the 4th.
I can do it on Friday the 4th at the same time slot.
I can as well.
Okay, Jessica, do you have any immediate issues with the Friday at 10 a.m.?
I do, but I can check with staff to see if they don't. It conflicts with our Aurora at Home governing board meeting that morning.
Okay, so let's follow up, I guess, let's plan on the 4th, unless there's like any significant staff issues. And if that is the case, I can make Wednesday, well, can you all make the Wednesday at 10 a.m. work? Maybe that's easier to coordinate.
Yes, I can.
Yep, that works for me.
Okay, what about Councilmember Medina?
I can do that.
Okay, how about we just do that and call it good and we don't have to go through it back and forth.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
We will
awesome.
get that
Alrighty.
taken care of on our end.
Sounds good. Thanks all. Meeting adjourned. Have a good rest of your day.
All right, take care, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.